Welcome everyone to the People's House.
Mr. Speaker, will you please call the House to order?
The governor has put forth a very ambitious and creative proposal.
Even though we've made some progress, there's still much more work to be done. Hi, I'm John McDonald, member of the 108th Assembly District. Welcome to the Capital Region Assembly Update.
Welcome as well. I'm Pat Fahy of the 109th Assembly District.
With us today is Peter Baynes, the Executive Director of the New York State Conference of Mayors. Peter, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Good to see you. Peter, let's talk. What does NYCOM? What are they all about? What do they do?
Well, NYCOM was formed 104 years ago when mayors realized, like we were talking about today, that they can't really do it all by themselves. They have to work together. So the mayor of Schenectady invited 40 other city mayors from around the state to come to Schenectady for 3 days to have a conference and meet about a water safety crisis they were having in their cities. And from that point forward, we created an association where we still do what they tried to do that day, which was work together on how to find revenues to pay for the essential services that cities and villages provide throughout the Capital District and throughout the state of New York.
Thank you as well for joining us today. We talk a lot about municipalities, particularly some of our older cities. We hear a lot about upstate. And do you want to talk about some of the challenges that are facing you? And we're right in the midst of the state budget cycle and hope to pass that by the 31st, by the end of this month. But let's talk about a few challenges there too. But,
sure. I mean, cities and villages, sometimes the name is city, village. It doesn't really matter. They have the same challenges. They're faced with dwindling resources. There's a property tax cap, which is a good thing in terms of controlling taxes at the local level, but it puts constraints on their primary revenue source. They continue to have tremendous needs in terms of providing public safety, water and sewer services, parks and recreation services, the kind of services your constituents use every single day. So providing those services that are all personnel driven, so therefore there's an expense to providing them. At the same time, state aid has been flat and actually reduced over the last 5 years. Their property tax revenues are essentially capped. So they're in a real bind. So I think the need for NYCOM actually is greater than ever for the municipalities because they're trying to find a way to work their way through this tough equation that it does not have any simple answers to it.
Now, the governor has proposed a property tax freeze. He's actually been doing a little bit of advertising on TV, as we both talked. Being a former mayor, I kind of get a little more sensitive than the average bear, I guess you would say. What are you hearing from the membership in regards to? And let me start off by saying I don't know any mayor, supervisor, county executive that wants to raise taxes. I think that's really the resounding message. As you know, both the Assembly and the Senate, maybe for different reasons, but we both have basically tried to politely reject the concept of the tax freeze because I can say personally, I don't know if it's reasonable. I don't know if it's going to be workable. And at the end of the day, this governor is results driven. I don't know if he's going to get the intended results. What are you hearing from your members?
Well, as you suggested, local officials, by definition, being local officials, locally elected, they're held accountable every single day. So, first of all, they don't want to raise taxes on themselves, on their own properties, but they don't want to raise taxes on their neighbors who they see and interact with on a daily basis. So they're trying to do everything they can at the local level to control taxes. The concern our members have with the tax freeze as it's proposed is that it's very complex and convoluted, and we think there are more direct ways to provide property tax relief. We've always said that if there's meaningful mandate relief and consistent growth in state aid to local governments, then local governments will just naturally keep taxes low while they're providing essential services. The governor's proposal doesn't do that. It has a top-down mandate that creates a formula for how much savings have to be generated through shared services. As you know, coming from local government, shared services and maximizing efficiencies is not something that is new to local governments. They have had to do it. So if there is going to be a requirement with the tax cap, with the tax freeze, that there's shared services, we're insisting that there be some credit for the work local governments have already done. You did as a mayor, John, as you've talked about. To just ignore that that work and the ongoing savings that are generated from that work isn't fair, and it doesn't give credit where credit is due, we don't think.
That's an excellent point, and expand a little more on that, on some of the other, we talked about property taxes. The cities, municipalities are also dependent upon other state aid. AIM funding, which is the aid to municipalities, has, I know, dwindled in recent years. Actually, over the last 30 years, I've heard it's down 75%. And give us a little more on how the ripple effect or impact of that is at the local level.
Well, the AIM program that you allude to, it used to be known as revenue sharing. The general concept was that the state of New York has a multitude of revenues available to it, most of which are more progressive, measure the ability to pay of a taxpayer than compared to a property tax at the local level. So the idea was local governments and their communities generate revenue for the state. Aid should come back to the state to help keep taxes low, maintain a quality of life that will generate even more local economic activity. That revenue source for local governments, as you said, has dwindled, and I think is one of the primary reasons property taxes needed to be capped through a state mandate, because local governments didn't have a partnership with the state in terms of a revenue source. So, it's funny. Schools, as you all know, are very dependent on state aid, and they again are a people business. They receive a significant amount of state aid. Many would say not enough state aid, but the increase in state aid for schools this year, as proposed in the budget, is more than all of the revenue sharing or AIM funding that's already distributed to the local government. So schools and children are the most important, we understand that, but municipalities have an important role to play, and we think the state needs to have more of a collaborative partnership with local governments, rather than a mandate from Albany saying, you have to start sharing, and don't tell us you have been sharing, you have to start sharing, and we're not going to give you credit for any sharing you've done. We actually proposed with the other municipal associations and the School Boards Association, rather than a tax freeze where a property owner pays increased taxes to a local government and awaits a rebate check from Albany, that the state would actually make a payment to any local government or school that stays under the tax cap, and that aid would be sufficient to allow that local government or school to freeze their taxes. That way, the resident, the small business, wouldn't have to pay increased taxes and await a rebate. We think that's a more fair approach to do it. The Assembly, as you know, is offered in your one-house budget a very generous and we think appropriate increase in AIM funding, which would go a long way toward giving local governments the tools to control taxes. So there's a ways to go, I think, in finding a property tax relief program that will work and that will be a state-local collaboration and that will be sustainable going forward.
Pat and I both had the opportunity this week to sit down with Governor Cuomo to talk about a couple different things.
Yes.
She's the education czar, I'm the local government guy. And we both had our chances to get our points in pretty well. And I think he's getting it, not because he sat down with us, but because he's hearing it from all over. But it is challenging, and you bring up a very good point. Local governments, by nature of their survival, have always had to be efficient, have been doing shared services when it's appropriate. And I think that's the key here. And it can't be top down, it needs to be bottoms up. It needs to be in a way where it makes sense. Sometimes putting that square hole, was the square peg in a round hole? It doesn't always work, does it?
Right.
It really doesn't. And it's funny when you mentioned about, and you're right, obviously we're both strong advocates for education, particularly in regards to support, but as we talked about recently, we're actually trying to incentivize small business to the tune of about $875 million a year. Meanwhile, our local governments, we're supporting them at $785 million a year. Even on that avenue, it's a little bit of an inequity, and that's something that we need to address. The local government efficiency grants that have been out there, that's part of what's been in place for several years now.
Right.
How have the members found that to be? Has it been helpful? Has it been underutilized, overutilized? What's your thoughts on that? What do you hear from the members?
Well, I think the local government efficiency grants have generally, our members feel that they've generally been used to do studies that reach conclusions that aren't, and oftentimes aren't achievable. They think the money that's been spent on the local government efficiency grants would be much better spent, would generate better efficiencies if it was invested into the AIM program. Because again, there's this pressure at the local level because of the accountability to be efficient. And I think the governor needs to remember that he has a huge success already that he can tout what it's done, and that's the tax cap. The tax cap, for any local government that wasn't already being efficient,
Right.
I'll tell you, the tax cap has made sure that they are working hard to be more efficient. So I think local accountability, the tax cap, those two things in combination with increased state aid would generate the efficiencies that the local government efficiency grant program is trying to achieve.
Let's talk a little bit about the Conference of Mayors and other things, non-budget related, that you might be promoting. We read a lot across the country about the push for more walkable cities, and that we are seeing changes in many cities where the population is expanding, and there's more of a recognition, they say, I guess, among the millenniums, the younger people, that are looking for walkable cities. Can you talk about your role there and what you see as the future of cities across the state?
I think that's a great point. I mean, we represent cities and villages, which, again, by definition, are densely populated local governments. They have great potential in this era of the millennials and walkable, smart growth type communities. That's why it's more important than ever that we find a way, that local governments working with the state, to strengthen our local governments. I think we're approaching a time where, upstate villages, small cities, and the larger urban cities can be very attractive to businesses, to the young college graduates, which we haven't done well with in New York of late. And that's why we've got to find a way to really make our local government stronger. You talk to your mayors in your district and the things they're trying to do with mixed use, redevelopment downtown, trying to get people downtown in a level of vibrancy. So
Yes.
it definitely makes it even more important that we help local governments in this current budget.
I can tell you, as being a former member and a president for a period of time, one of probably the best kept secrets, but it's really the most valuable, I think, is the training programs. I mean, NYCOM does an excellent job of really bringing the most current opportunities to our members in regards to whether it's economic development, whether it's dealing with the big challenge, which is vacant properties, the whole 9 yards. I think that's probably one of our strongest suits, outside of the advocacy.
Yeah, the advocacy is important. Advocacy, though, is I think it's a slow, gradual process to achieve progress. Whereas in training and just the legal technical assistance we provide every day, we see it as acting as really a shared service among all of our members. They pay us dues. Rather than having to hire a slew of attorneys or other experts on municipal issues, they can call our association. We have attorneys on staff and financial experts. We can help them with the challenges that they all face. We've heard all the problems before. To them, it seems like a new, unwieldy problem, but to us, since we've heard it before, we can help with it. Training is very important too. We're doing training on the Affordable Care Act. We're doing training on on smart growth and making your downtowns more attractive to people and businesses. And the challenges are so great, therefore the opportunities for education are great as well.
Well, listen, this has been great. And Peter, once again, thanks for coming on. Both Pat and I enjoy having you here. And thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Thank you.